Poland is on the edge. Basically, they're very nervous about how closely the Wagner mercenary group that's now housed in Belarus is to the Belarusian border, close to the Poland side. Is there beef between Poland and Russia, or is this just Poland being defensive of Ukraine and that's provoking Russia? Why they would be so nervous about the Wagner mercenary group? Or is it just that this, killing machine is so close to the border?
But I respect Polish military professionals and I respect Polish intelligence professionals. Not politicians, but professionals. And any military professional and an intelligence professional will make the following assessment about Wagner in Belarus. One, there's only 8,000 of them. Two, they're lightly armed. They've been disarmed of their heavy weaponry. Three, they operate within a mandate set forth by their relationship with the Belarus government. Four, the Belarus government is not looking for a fight with Poland. Five, the Belarus government has an agreement with Russia not to allow Wagner to reconstitute itself in a way that mirrors that which existed in the Donbass in June of this year when Wagner carried out what was a de facto insurrection against the Russian government. So when you add all that up, you can't view Wagner as a military threat. They're not a military threat. The scope and scale of the violence taking place in Ukraine today, we're talking about, armies that are hundreds of thousands strong, well-equipped with artillery and everything. What made Wagner an effective fighting force wasn't just the skill, the tactical skill of the individual Wagner fighter and the operational proficiency of the Wagner commanders, but they were backed up by the might of the Russian military. They had tanks. Wagner doesn't have tanks. It's a private military contractor. Wagner does not own a tank factory that produces Wagner tanks. Wagner received tanks from the Russian Ministry of Defense to support their combat operations in the Donbass. Wagner no longer has tanks. Wagner had artillery or was provided artillery support by Russian units operating adjacent to it. Wagner no longer has that. They don't have artillery ammunition. If they have small arms, meaning individual weapons, they're going to be individual weapons that are issued to them by the Belarus government because Wagner has turned over all of the Ministry of Defense property back to the Russian Ministry of Defense. So what Wagner was in the Donbass is not what it is in Belarus. But one of the key aspects of Wagner is that there is a certain mythology that's been built around them, that they are somehow this extraordinarily deadly, superhuman killing machine. And that's why you can start a rumor that says 100 Wagner fighters moved towards the Suwalki Gap. That is this border zone between Poland and Lithuania that connects Belarus with the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad. 100 Wagner fighters went there, and Poland went into a panic. And in that, Wagner's very good. Wagner has established a certain mystique, and they want to continue that mystique. That's why Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, joked with Vladimir Putin last month about, Wagner guys are hungry. They're looking at Warsaw. They're thinking maybe they'll go to Warsaw for a vacation or something like that. Well, Wagner's not going to Warsaw. There's not enough of them. If anybody understands what modern warfare is like, the notion that 8,000 Wagner guys, even if say you beefed it up to 20,000, that's not going to have any impact. Wagner's number one mission right now is Africa. The Belarus training mission is a holding pattern for them on the ground in Belarus, where they're establishing a new base of operations. But their moneymaker and where they're doing most of their fighting today is in Africa, where they have significant presence in the Central African Republic, extensive presence in Mali. They're in the Sudan, they're in Libya, they're in Chad. There's talk that they may be in Burkina Faso. They could get involved in Niger. All these places are currently in the news right now where there's the makings of a big, large-scale war between a pro-Russian bloc of nations and a pro-American French bloc of nations. The African continent is on the cusp of a war that, when you look at the territory involved, would make the war in Ukraine pale by comparison. And Wagner's there. They're at the center of that. That's where Wagner's at. That's where their focus of effort is. This stuff in Belarus is just a sideshow, and they're having some fun. The Poles are in the business right now of trying to double the size of their army. They're trying to justify hundreds of billions of dollars of expenditure of weapons. In order to do that, you need a threat. And Wagner provides a politically useful threat model that the Poles can use as a fear factor to generate or justify military expenditure. But Wagner's not a threat to Poland and Belarus.
Putin recently said that Ukraine is losing 10 times as many soldiers as Russia, and that this won't end well for Ukraine. Have you found those numbers to be accurate? Was recent battles a 10-to-1 ratio? Because I know in Bakhmut it was around 7-to-1. Is it this recent Zaporizhia and some of these other big battles that are in the news? Are they really as high as a 10 death to 1 ratio?
Absolutely. In some cases, it could be even higher. It's the Ukrainian military has been given a mission impossible. If the United States Marine Corps, which I consider to be the finest fighting force on the face of the earth, was given the task of breaching Russian defensive lines, we could do so, but we would take heavy casualties. But we would do so using a tremendous amount of firepower that Ukraine doesn't have right now. And, we would have to achieve artillery supremacy, meaning that we put more artillery fire bear on them than they put on us. It's just a tough thing to do, given the fact that the Russians have more artillery tubes than anybody in the world. We would supplement our artillery with close air support. That's going to be a very difficult thing to do because of the Russian integrated air defenses. This will be a major military effort requiring the best combat force in the world, the Marine Corps, working together with overwhelming air support and firepower support, artillery support. The Ukrainians are not the finest fighting force in the world. The troops that are going into battle now, many of them have 21 days basic training, then a few more weeks of operational training. They're trying to master combat techniques, combined arm techniques that take American soldiers and Marines years to master. They're trying to master it in a matter of weeks. You can't. It's absurd. It's the same thing if I tried to take someone and teach them how to be a brain surgeon, just by showing them videos of all this stuff, and then suddenly I bring in a patient that has a massive head trauma, and I say, "Sure, the patient." That patient's going to die because the brain surgeon that only saw videos is incapable of doing this. You need someone who's gone through medical school, been trained to specifically do that, has sat in on surgeries, understands what they're doing, etc. Ukraine's not that. They don't have the air power. They're never going to get the air power. Even the F-16s that we're talking about giving them right now, we're talking about 12 to 24. For the F-16 to have any meaningful impact on the battlefield, you're going to need 200 or 300 of them. They're not there. The pilots will have no training, useful training. It takes 6 months to get them up just basic skill sets, and then you have to do things like suppression of enemy air defense, close air support, air-to-air engagements, and they have to be proficient in all because they're going to be called upon to do all, and they're going to accomplish none. So they don't have air power. Their artillery. One of the things at the battle for Bakhmut, you brought it up earlier. One thing that happened there is that the Ukrainians not only fired the majority of their 155 millimeter artillery ammunition reserves, so they depleted the reserves that were needed to support the counterattack. They burned through the tubes. To give you an example, in Syria, the Marine Corps, the U.S. Marines were providing fire support in the final phases of the fight against ISIS. And the Marine artillery tubes, 155 millimeter M777 tubes, they were firing thousands of rounds downrange, and they burned out their barrels. So barrels now are useless. If you continue to use them, there's going to be a chance that the barrel is going to explode, burst, or because it no longer has the tolerances, and the round coming out is going to be spinning off in a different direction. It's going to be very inaccurate. Well, the Ukrainians have burned out almost all their barrels. They've got no new barrels, and they don't have the luxury of pulling their artillery out, sending it back to Europe to get new barrels because we don't have new barrels to give them. Nobody planned on this. It's not there. So their artillery is burned out, running out of ammo. It's a bad deal, and so the Ukrainians simply can't do the task that they've been given now, and we know this. We know that they can't do it. We trained them knowing they're incapable of accomplishing this task. The Russians, on the other hand, they can do everything that they want to do. They have the proper training, the proper equipment. They're motivated. The Ukrainians right now, we're dealing with troops that are being dragged off the streets. You asked if the casualty figures are believable. I've been saying for some time now that my personal calculations, looking at things and crunching data, leads me to believe that the Ukrainian dead are between 280 and 320,000 known killed in action. But I also acknowledge that there's about 80,000 missing, 80 to 90,000 missing in action, of whom the vast majority are dead but abandoned on the battlefield. So if we say 80,000, we call it 60,000 missing on the battlefield. We take that 60,000 added to 380,000, you get 340,000. You add it to 320, you get 380,000. A new report just came out based upon internal Ukrainian data that talked about nearly 400,000 dead. So I think my numbers are spot on. I think it's very likely the Ukrainians have suffered these casualties, and the Ukrainians can't even hide it anymore. People are looking at the growth of the cemeteries right now in Ukraine. They've just grown exponentially by orders of magnitude as the bodies that are brought home are put in the ground. They're running out of space to put them in. This is a tragedy. 10-1, absolutely. I think on bad days for the Ukrainians, because 10-1 implies a normal pace of combat operations. The Ukrainians right now are actually trying to force the issue by pushing more and more troops in an effort to break the will of the Russian defenders. It's not working. I think right now, in some days, you're going to be looking at 12, 13, 14, 15-1 casualty ratios. The Ukrainians are on track to easily lose 500,000 men dead by the end of this summer.